When people think about the Portuguese national team, they think about Ronaldo. Whether you like him or hate him, not only does he constantly put Portugal's name on the map, but he's also one of the greatest players of all time who elevated Portugal's football to a completely different level. Before his debut, Portugal had only been to 3 World Cups in over 70 years, and now, almost 22 years later, Portugal hasn't missed a single international tournament with several noteworthy campaigns including a Euro Championship. However, you'd be fooled if you believe Portugal had no pedigree whatsoever before Ronaldo, because in reality, a seleção came home with a medal right in their first international tournament. So, in this video, I decided to travel back to 1966 and figure out how these debutants from the butt of Europe managed to shock the whole world and have an incredible World Cup performance that many believed should have ended with gold. We'll look into every aspect that played a role in their unthinkable success, and by the end, I'm sure you'll realize Portugal in 1966 was much more than just Eusebio plus 10. So, as usual, let me give you some context. Before the 1966 World Cup, Portugal had never made it to that tournament or to the 2 editions of the newly created Euro Championship. I mean, it's not like qualifying was easy. There were way fewer menus to bulldoze through, and since Portugal was never one of the seeded teams, they always had to deal with a powerhouse. Besides, the groups were super small, around 3 teams each, which basically erased any margin of error that the big nations have nowadays. Time and time again, big countries will slip and lose some points only to surpass the underdogs closer to the end of the qualifying stage. But since there were only 4 matches to play and only 1 team progressed, if you lost one, you were practically out of the race. So, did Portugal qualify because the qualification process got easier? Well, yes and no. While the groups did expand, Portugal still had to beat Czechoslovakia, the runners-up from the previous World Cup. So in reality, this qualification was completely earned and not just the result of an easier path to the tournament. But how could Portugal suddenly rival a competent team like Czechoslovakia? Well, it all began at club level. First and foremost, let's kick the obvious out of the way. Benfica was amazing in the 1960s, with a rise dating back to the 1950s with a talented generation of Portuguese players such as José Águas, Domiciano Cavém and Mário Coluna. Then, with the emergence of another batch of world-class talent such as José Augusto, Torres, and later on Eusébio, Benfica crushed everyone around them, winning the Champions League consecutively in 1961 and 1962. So, was it just down to Benfica? Not really. You see, Sporting also had one of the best squads in their history back then, and just like Benfica, they also conquered the international trophy. And in order to do so, the Lions had to beat several top teams, including a 5-0 ass whooping over Man United before meeting and beating Hungarian giants MTK in the final. Sporting was never a pushover to Benfica in the league. They always stood toe-to-toe against the Eagles, and they even won the league in the year Benfica won the Champions League. They might have not possessed the same attacking prowess from the days of the 5 violins, but they contributed a lot offensively to Portugal in 1966, with the likes of Alexandre Batista, José Carlos and the legendary Hilário being key pieces to the last wall before Belenenses' historic keeper José Pereira. Unlike nowadays, Portugal could afford to keep the stars that guided their clubs to success. You could justify it with the clubs not being so focused on profiting like nowadays, or you can credit Salazar for pressuring the players to refuse transfers abroad, which in turn made the players even more connected with each other. But the true glue that held everything together was Otto Glória. Former assistant of Flávio Costa, a man who took the first steps in revolutionizing Brazilian football into the renowned Joga Bonito, who I've mentioned in this video, Otto Glória was the perfect man to lead his squad to success. After all, he had worked with the 4 biggest clubs in Portugal in the years leading up to that tournament. He already knew how to bring the best out of every player, and above all, he knew how to make them click with one another, even though the players in question had been nothing more than rivals up until that point. In practice, Portugal's football would never work nowadays. It was too risky. Sure, they had a solid backline and a rocking midfield in Jaime Graça, but other than that, everyone else was up front. Coluna, the box-to-box midfielder who ran around the field like a long-distance athlete, and a front line of 4 players. But you know what Portugal also had that no nation, and I mean no nation, had at the time? A nailing of a player at the peak of his powers. Sure, England had Bobby Charlton, Brazil had Pele, and Spain had Luis Suarez, but no player carried the team more than Eusebio in that tournament. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Portugal wasn't Eusebio plus 10, but it sure did help having the Black Panther up front. In their debut match, where Portugal beat Hungary, the then Olympic gold medalists, back when winning the football gold medal still meant something, they won without needing goals from Eusebio. In the second match, Portugal sent Bulgaria home with Eusebio's first World Cup goal, an own goal, and another one by the gentle giant Torres. Still, the true career-defining performances were yet to come. In Portugal's last match, a seleção were still major underdogs despite coming off two dominant victories. I mean, they were facing the back-to-back World Cup winners with Pele at the forefront, but in the year 1966, there was no brighter star than Eusebio. In that anticipated meetup, Portugal earned the victory in a back-and-forth match, won with a late Eusebio goal. A goal that not only marked history for the Portuguese, but also a pause in a seemingly endless era of Brazilian dominance. Though many Brazilians still claim to this day that if it wasn't for the lenient referee that allowed Bulgarian defenders to injure Pele without any consequences, they would still be fighting for the gold. But I'll leave this for a deeper dive on one of the craziest World Cups of all time, if you guys wanna see it, of course. Anyways, fate would have it that the two breakout debutants would play against one another in the quarters. Portugal had a relatively simple task at hand in the form of North Korea. Of course, only if you ignore the fact that they beat Italy in the group stage and the somber reality that their lives probably depended on their performances on the pitch. That industrious attitude contrasted with the Portuguese sleepiness, as they might have thought they had the match won before it even started. North Korea built up a 3-goal lead before the match had even reached 30 minutes on the clock. But then came Eusebio, ready to carry Portugal by himself by brute force and athleticism. That afternoon, the Black Panthers scored 4 goals to help Portugal turn that huge deficit around and comfortably win 5-3. The sky was now the limit for the Magriço generation. They had toppled giants, they had shown their composure and willingness to fight back against major adversity, and they were ready to face England in Goodison Park, Liverpool, perhaps the least English sympathizing part of the country. Except that they changed the location to Wembley because it would be unthinkable for those not to be treated as such in their own tournament. So Portugal had to make the longer trip, play in a stadium they had never stepped foot into during that World Cup, and in the end they were beaten and left to fight for bronze. You know, I could turn this into a major crybaby rant about how the English were favoured, but I won't. They were simply more competent than the Portuguese, and despite the narrow margin, the Three Lions dominated the entire match and managed to keep Portugal at bay. This tournament would end on a bare note for Portugal though. After Eusebio's tears of frustration came the joy of another major win against a football superpower. This time, the victims were the disciplined Soviet Union, who not so long ago had won the Euros. Still, Portugal made them look average, just like they did against Hungary, Brazil, and Czechoslovakia in qualifying. Portugal wrote their first page of history in style, and after such an incredible run, a seleção could only expect to live more and more glorious moments like this. Yeah, right. It would take another 20 years before we saw Portugal in a World Cup, and another 40 before they played a knockout match in a tournament of this magnitude. Curiously, Portugal's current rise would also coincide with the emergence of another otherworldly talent. So, if you believe in fate and wild predictions, maybe in 20 years we'll have an even crazier Portuguese baller coming up that could potentially overshadow both Eusebio and Ronaldo. Or maybe I was just seeing patterns in everything thanks to taking strong coffee at night to write this video. Either way, I hope you enjoy this one. Let me know if you wanna see me cover unexplored topics like this one, or if I should just play it safe and make a video on a huge controversy in order to piss everyone off. If you follow this channel for a while now, you know I love to cover iconic moments from football history, but I also can't resist pissing some diehards off. So I'll leave it up to you. Like and comment what you wanna see, and I'll take your preferences into consideration, as I always do, here on your friendly football companion, Throne FC. Thanks for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you in the comments.